Okay, so I think we can get started. I hope the recording is on.
Yep, you're good to go.
Great. Thanks. A warm welcome from my side. This is Gaurav speaking from Bangalore, and I really welcome you to the March episode of our SAP BTP Garage. To our veterans and the supporters who join us on a regular monthly basis, thank you so much. Please keep the support coming in. And to our new joiners, SAP BTP Garage is all about bringing out new use cases built by the experts, built for the community, and how you can implement those use cases in your landscapes. Yeah, so that is the whole idea for Garage. And today's episode is all about how you and your businesses can control your operational costs by developing application on top of BTP, which helps you to do your financial operations. Yeah. Joining me today are the experts who created this very wonderful use case, which is very high in demand, I must say. So I'm joined by Eran and Willem, who would be talking about this use case and also the hands and minds behind this use case. I'm also being joined by Cecily, also the global host for SAP Garage. And as I already said, it's you who have made SAP Garage a huge success over the past months and years. So keep extending that support and keep sharing the Garage series with your colleagues and peers. Before we deep dive and I hand it over to the experts, I also wanted to bring to your attention that there is also a community group for Cloud FinOps. So we would be sharing the links to the community in few minutes. But this is also again a great channel to keep those questions coming in and keep those conversations also alive with the experts. So I would really motivate you to join the group and brainstorm your queries over that channel. Just like SAP BTP Garage, we also have some hands-on and in-person partner workshops tailored to your business needs. On the screen, you would see the 3 locations where we have rolled out these locations. For 2 of them, the registration link is already active. So if you or your colleagues are based around those regions, feel free to share them to register and join these workshops in person. With that, I would like to hand over to our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, so I'll share my screen and then we can start. So thank you all very much for joining. My name is Eran and with me is Willem. So my background, and I'm over 10 years in SAP and a few years in the domain of metering and reporting in SAP, which turned into like the FinOps area in BTP. And with me, Willem.
Yes, good morning, good evening from my side as well. My name is Willem. Been with SAP for the last 13 years, always focused on platforms, application development, integration, and the likes. And as one of the co-creators of the application, I'm excited to share it here with you and dive into some of the technical details after Eran introduce the topic to you.
Wonderful, thank you, Willem. All right, so this is me and Willem and myself, and we can start. So over, I guess, the past 7 years when BTP upgraded to the commercial model of the pay-per-use, we've seen different consumers of BTP with different levels of requirements and needs from this domain called financial operation. And we classify them not as customers, but as different persona within the organization who needs different elements. So we have like the first tier of the people who are using BTP as the global account admins, the one who wants to monitor everything, who have access to the BTP cockpit, and they could see all the ingestions and reporting and analytics and to find some kind of anomaly management. And basically, they want to make sure everything is in place and is being handled and run smoothly. The second layer that we met during the time, we met about the business controller. So the one who are taking the data and put it in Excel, Power BI, SAC, and Google Data Studio, and they want a bit more. They want some kind of a forecasting capabilities. They want planning, estimation, budgeting, and also cross-charging in a higher level. And this is what we call the tier of the walk. And then we saw on the customer's side also another tier, and this is, I'm not sure if you know, also in Netflix, dedicated teams, dedicated persona who works only about optimization of cloud costs. So when a big company can save some bucks on compute or on storage, this is how they go to, and they don't see it as like consuming less. They want to consume more, but to make informed decision about their consumption. And it's all about optimization, workload, hibernation, waste management, right sizing. So the next step in it. And today in BTP, we have a variety of solutions for you. But here we will discuss about the mission that we developed and is deployed on the Discovery Center. And the target of this application is to be the single central FinOps solution for all SAP products, by the way. So we are jumping from the BTP landscape into the whole cloud, SAP cloud landscape. When currently we are a solution that gives you the opportunity to connect multiple GAs or multiple global accounts into one place. We are giving you the opportunity to handle just one tagging and labeling service without need to jump between labelings, etc. Plus, we are also giving you a framework for shared instances, and we will talk about it in a second. But all in all, we do start in the cockpit, and the cockpit is a wonderful tool for everyone to see the data. It's getting lots of new features every now and then, and they are improving the glimpse and the detailing level of what every customer admin or global account admin need to see. And I'm pretty sure there is more coming from them, and it's amazing the thing that they are done in the cockpit. The second level is the APIs. So the same APIs that we are feeding into the cockpit, we have it as a service in the Discovery Center called Usage Data Management, and you can instantiate it. It's a free service. You can take the APIs, go to your business systems like Power BI, Aptio, Google Data Cloud, or SAP Analytics Cloud, connect the APIs there and do all the business work inside the business tools. And on the third layer, we created this FinOps application. And you can see here all the different services that we are using within the application, and also the ability basically to run it in one global account, but to also connect several other global accounts to this instance of the application. And we had a customers, a big global company which has 17 different subsidiaries and 5 different contracts and 5 different global accounts, and they want to connect all 22 global accounts into one place and to see it. And this is one very important capabilities of the application, regardless of the commercial models. So regardless if it's on subscription or pay-per-use or pay-as-you-go, you can connect all global accounts into one place. So I won't dive into every topic that we see here, but basically you can get an overview on all usage, on all credit consumption, and all breakdowns. You can get into deep dive analytics and reporting based on daily metrics, based on the monthly recording. You can see the commercial details, you can see technical details. And since we are using like a local persistency layer, if you have some kind of an outlier that you want it done to, that it won't disrupt your forecasting capabilities. So in the history, you can also delete a record, something that you cannot do in the snapshots today. But since all the data is locally stored on your machine, you can have it, and you can change here the configuration for forecasting capabilities. Really nice thing. So, and the second thing is the breakdown. So we are going from a customer level to a global account level. So several global account, data centers, directories, sub accounts, and all the way up to the service instance and the space and the application inside, and see the breakdown of the charging per this one, plus the expenditure of your credits. So there is a graph that can show you how much credits you are consuming on 1 month, and when do you need to start the negotiation for the top-up or the renewal of the contract. One great element that we are serving here, and this is when we talk about labeling and tagging, and this is, I think, the heart of the unit economics or the cost allocation or the cost charging, is the ability to put tags. And what you see here is the ability to put tags in one solution for all entities, plus the ability to take one entity like a sub-account or an instance and divide the amount of charging needs to be taken from this sub-account into different line of business. So we can say, hey, this sub-account IT doesn't need to pay only one line of business, because inside of it, several line of businesses uses the resources. So we can say, hey, 20% needs to be allocated to the finance line of business, HR, and sales by the different percentiles here. And you can support up to 10 different managed tags, and to have a lot of also custom tags. And what it basically gives you, this is this screen. A screen when the BTP entities are no longer important, so you're not talking about sub-account, etc. You can only speak about the tags. So basically transposing all the BTP entities breakdown of the data and the cost to your tagging. So you can see how much each finance, HR, sales, etc. needs to take place, plus a very good and important guardrail, a very robust implementation of the alert notification service, which can give you alerts on credits, bill items, usage on the level of a service, on the level of a metric, combined from several different services into one, a lot of properties, a lot of operators. So a very robust mechanism for you to do the alerting. From timeline perspective, we deployed it in April, released it in GitHub in June, lots of download, lots of pull requests, people are helping us, lots of customers deploying it, webinars, we are being invited to do it more and more, and up to date, lots of other services are joining with us and creating lots of content in the application, and see it as a delivery vehicle to bring more and more financial operation to their customers. And as Gaurav also mentioned, this Cloud FinOps interest group that we got to facilitate all the conversation around it. So you're very, very welcome. Basically, before I hand it over to Willem, take it, go see it, try it, deploy it. It's 4 hours tops, and you have the application running. So share the mission, share our community, share the success stories and the customers that are really happy. And if you have like new use cases that you want to see inside, influence tickets and problems and questions, the community is always welcome. And talk about it. Talk about it that BTP is all in the FinOps category. And it's not about consuming less resources, it's about consuming more, but making informed decisions about it. And approach us, approach the BTP service owners to bring more and more metering data and more financial data sets into the application. It will be wonderful. And with this, I will hand over to Willem to see how to start the application on your side. Willem, bring out your best.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Eran. So yeah, let me take over the screen share. And then I would like to take everyone through a bit the different steps and how to actually get this application live in your own landscape. Because the FinOps application is deployed in your own account. So it is offered as an open source tool. The code is for you free to use, free to adapt. And it runs in your own account. So even though that there is no license to the tool itself, the FinOps tool, there will be some services that are needed on the BTP to host and run the tool in your account. And to get started, you can always refer back to the Cloud FinOps SAP community group, because here in the bookmarks repository, We linked a few items here. For example, here you have the session of today linked, but then here in the FinOps tool, there's Discovery Center Mission that actually brings everything together. So in this mission, of course, as Eran mentioned, the tool is there for you to use and does a few things, and you can read through this documentation again. But I'd like to focus on the project board. So in the project board, you will have, as with every mission, the different steps to go through to deploy the application in your own account and start seeing your data and having visibility in your credit allocations and consumption. At first, of course, there's again some information about the tool. There's also a link to a YouTube video where I take you through each and every step of this mission board to guide you a bit. And then there are some points to note if you decide to use a free tier of BTP, because it is possible, but there are some limitations. To give you one example, if you're familiar with HANA Cloud and HANA Cloud in the free tier, you might know that it stops every evening. So that means that if the database stops, then the refresh of data cannot happen. The tool refreshes its data every 3 hours, so also throughout the night. And then if your database is not up and running, that refresh cannot happen, and you will have to manually in the morning start a database or click on the refresh button. So there are a few things to note, but technically it is possible to run on free tier and test out a few things before you actually deploy it in your account. Deploying it in your account, there's also something where you have to understand that you only have to deploy it once in your global account for the tool to see everything in your global account. So if you have a multi-sub account setup, for example, dev, test, production, or project 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, then you can choose any of those sub accounts. It can be a sandbox where you deploy the tool into. And the moment the tool runs in a global account, it can see the consumption of all sub-accounts and all directories in that global account. And as Eran mentioned, you can also extend it to multiple global accounts. If for some reasons you have more than one contract with SAP and more than one global account, you can also hook them up in the same tool, so you see all the information together. So in order to get started, so there is some preparation you need. This is more related to entitlements and prerequisites. So the tool, as we can see, for example, in the architecture, the tool itself relies on some BTP services. The biggest ones are, for example, HANA Cloud and WorkZone. Then there is an SAC component as well. Now that is optional. It is recommended, but it's an optional component that you can add if you have SAC, or you can leave out for now if you do not have SAC at the moment. So of course, all these services and the entitlements have to be available in the sub-account where you want to deploy the solution, or at least reachable, for example, HANA Cloud, if it runs in a different sub-account in the same region. So this is just about entitlements preparations that you need to have. In terms of technical entitlements, there is, for example, alert notification to send you alerts. There's job scheduler to refresh the data. So there's just a few items you have to make sure you add to your account before you deploy the solution. And then it's quite important to choose your deployment target, because if you look a bit further here, there's option A, deploy to Cloud Foundry, option B, deploy to Kyma. So both options are available to you, depending on your preference, depending on your standardization in your organization. If you chose Cloud Foundry or chose Kyma to centralize your app deployments. So both are possible. The steps to deploy them are slightly different. Hence, there are two separate tracks and two separate options for you to choose your deployment depending on your deployment target. But in essence, in here, the tool itself consists of 3 components. There is the backend component, which is a CAP application, and that is the one that is deployed to either Cloud Foundry or Kyma. Then there is the SAC component, so with stories and dashboards. And then there is a UI component that goes into WorkZone. So each of these 3 modules, where SAC is optional, needs to be deployed. And the first one, the backend application, the CAP application, is then the first one you deploy here in either of those 2 tracks. Once that is done, you can look at the second component, which is the SAC module. So that is optional, as I mentioned before. So you can always open your SAC tenant and upload the pre-built content that you can download from the Git as a single file upload it there and connect it to the HDI of the tool to start consuming its data. And then last but not least, the third component is the UI component. So the application consists of 8 different UI5 applications. They will be deployed when you implement the tool. They will be deployed in Workzone, and it's just about doing some small configurations there to hook them up to your backend application, and then create your website to visualize that to the user. And then last but not least, once it's deployed, it's about consuming the application. So there are a few roles that need to be assigned. And then you can start to use the tool to set some certain forecasts and maybe add additional global accounts or do some other configuration. And that's it, then you're live. So when it comes to these roles, for example, here, when you go to the role collections, then you will see here there are 3 roles relevant to the application. The first one is the access role. This is the front-end role that you need to access the Workzone content. The SAC role is the role that gives additional access to also the SAC stories. So if you decide to implement SAC, you can also assign this role. If you decide to implement the application without SAC, then you just don't assign this role. And then the menu items are hidden to access the SAC component. And then the last role is the third one. This is the backend role, the CAP application access that every user will need to have access to the data through the UI that is being provided. Now, after deployment, of course, the application is you can see here some of the instances that get created, and then some of the subscriptions that are needed, for example, BAS and Workzone. My HANA Cloud is reused from a different sub-account, so that's not visible here, but it's, of course, also needed to host and run the application. To start the process, everything is on Git. So the Git page here is linked as well. It has very similar requirement steps and deployment steps. For example, you see here again the 3 components, the backend app, the SAC component, and the front end. So it just, everything is here on one page. Depending on your preference, you can use the project board to go through it, or you can use these steps on Git to go through deployment. But in essence, the end result is the same. So the code here is available to use, and that, of course, you just consume via BAS. In BAS, you just do the git clone and you do the deployment, and that is all stepwise explained in the project board on how to do that. But before you do that, you actually have to tweak the code depending on your landscape, because there are these different components. There is the backend, the front end, the SAC, and we kind of have to hook them up before you deploy the application. So part of the steps that is documented are to change some of the items in the coding depending on your landscape and sub-account. So if we quickly look at some of the changes that I had to do here before my deployment, there's one change where in the specification and the configuration of the alert notification service, I had to input my email address because the tool will refresh this data every 3 hours. Every 3 hours, it will run through the list of configured alerts to see which alerts are being triggered and who has to be notified about specific services that maybe consume more than expected. So we have to specify who should receive that email. So it doesn't have to be the one that deploys the app, it can be someone else. But in this configuration, we have to specify the receiver of that email. Now, this is just a very simple initial configuration that we push to alert notification service. Once that is pushed and deployed, then you can use the UI of alert notification service to change this, to add more recipients, to maybe add more channels on top of email, for example, Microsoft Teams notifications or Slack notifications, whatever alert notification allows you to use as kind of distribution channels of those alerts. But this is just a very initial configuration to make sure that when you deploy the app, at least there is an initial kind of destination for the emails to reach you. And then there is also a Workzone folder. Workzone refers to all the UI components. So you see here the 8 different apps that we have in SAP UI5. And each of them, you quickly have to specify in which sub-account you actually deployed your application. So you can get this from the cockpit. So this is something where we have to mesh up or kind of link the work zone content package with deployed UI5 applications. So just put the sub-account ID here, and then the tiles know where to go to. And the last component is when it comes to SAC, which is an optional component. If you do use it, then there's a placeholder for the your SAC story URL that you also have to update with where you deployed your SAC story. Because SAC is always something that typically sits either in a different contract or a different data center or a different region. So typically doesn't sit in the same sub account. So that is where you can just deep link any SAC tenant or account that you have. And then you just mention the link here to make sure that the menu items of the FinOps tool can embed the correct story for the user to immediately visualize this SAC story in the UI of the FinOps tool. So these are just 3 changes: your email address, the sub-account ID, and the SAC story that you have to add to the code line before you do the deployment to the backend or deployment to WorkZone to make sure that everything works as it is. But these steps, they are explained in the project board. So that is just good to know here. Now, there is also one additional file, and that is the settings file. The settings file sits in the SRV folder. This is actually a file that allows you to tweak the application. And the file at the moment is configured for a baseline kind of standard implementation of a tool. So in first instance, when you just get familiar with the tool and the deployment, you do not have to bother with this file. But it could be interesting afterwards to have a look at it to see how the tool was deployed and how it is configured and what you could potentially tweak or change to fit more to your usage. And a few things to note here is, for example, the first one, the multi-global account mode. So this is something by default disabled because normally you would have one global account. But if you do have multiple global accounts that you want to hook in the application, you should switch on this toggle. And this actually also then is important to understand if your global accounts use a single currency or not. Because it is possible that one global account is in US dollars, the second global account is in euros. And if they are different in currency, then we can't really give you a total consumption amount or total credit amount because it's different currencies. So we actually convert everything to a single currency. So the moment you switch this on, it might be possible you also have to activate currency conversion here, which is by default disabled, and choose a single target or unified currency. That means any global account that comes in with a different currency, there all the consumption, the commercial metrics get translated into that target currency. That translation is done based on hard-coded values here, exchange rates, that is just chosen based out of simplicity in the tool and to make sure that we know how they get translated. Of course, they might not be exact, but it is not the purpose of the tool to replace your billing or official invoice from SAP. It is just for you to get an understanding roughly where the consumption is coming from and which global account contributes what to your overall cost. Now, if you only have one global account, of course, there's no need to do currency conversion. You can have your global account in any currency that SAP supports. So then that is not relevant to you. Further down in the in this file, we also see, for example, initial history load month. This is a setting defaulted to October 2023. What this means is just that whenever you deploy the tool, there is an initial set of data that gets loaded from the history. Because every time when you deploy the tool, every 3 hours, the tool will refresh its information with the latest situation. It does it every 3 hours. Now, of course, today it would read the information from the 12th of March, and you will know what you consume in March, but the tool will not know what you did in February or January or December or last year. So for that, it needs to load history. That's more like a once-off exercise you do. And the moment you deploy the tool, there is an initial load that happens. And this parameter just tells the tool from which month it should start loading. If you want to pull more history, you can either do it in the UI afterwards or you tweak the setting here. But that's just for you to understand where that is coming from. And then we have the forecast setting. So in the tool, we give you the option to forecast consumption. For example, we know now that services up until the 12th of March consumed X, but what does it mean towards the end of the month? That is a forecast, and there are different forecasting methods that the tool supports. You can see all the different options in the UI, but for here, we chose a default setting. If you didn't manually configure it, then by default, this is the forecast setting that every service receives. And I will show you in the UI where that is relevant and where to change that. And last but not least, there are, if alerts get created, then there is a table that gets presented to you. These are the columns of the table if you want to tweak the table. And then last but not least, there are tags that are configured. Tags for cross-charging. So by default, we gave you 2 tags, which is line of business and cost center, but we have allocation for up to 10 different tags. You can add department and project and owner and those kind of things as managed tags. And then you have an unlimited space of custom tags as well, where you can just allocate in a binary value to a certain part of your account. So this is just an area for you to add more tags. Now, this is not the only area in the application. If you do decide to add more than 2 tags, you also have in another area to add these tags. So this is not the only place, but it's just a reminder that it is there. And in documentation, you will find the different areas where you have to add it to make sure that the user sees it on the screen as well. So this is a very quick run through of the settings file that might be relevant in a second iteration after you deployed your Hello World kind of tool, just for you to understand what is where. Now, after the deployment and once the Cloud Foundry or Kima is deployed, Kima has specific files here, and the work zone is configured as well, and the roles are assigned, then your end users will receive the application. And this is how the application looks, and it's kind of vanilla implementation without changing any of the configurations or basic settings in the settings file. It starts with an overview that gives you insight in the top 5 services that consume most of your credits across your global account, as well as where they reside. So you can see the breakdown by sub-account, by directory, or if you do decide to add multiple global accounts, also breakdown by global account. But here we just have a single global account connected. You also see the trend over the last, let's say, 30 to 60 days. So at the moment, we see that our cost to date is $1,031 with a forecast going up to $1,500 towards the end of March, as what we expect the account to consume towards month end. These are the 8 different UI5 applications. The same are linked in the top menus here, together with the SAC items as well. For example, here under cross-charging, you see 2 dashboards here. This is actually a deep link into SAC. So if you would decide not to implement SAC and not to grant the SAC role to the end user, then these 2 menu items will not be shown. So the user doesn't get confused by having an option that doesn't work in the menu. Now, running through the application, the first section is billing verification. This is a section that takes a very service-centric view. It looks at your different services individually across all sub-accounts, all directories, and all global accounts connected. For example, we have here HANA Cloud. And if we go into details, we can see that our cost to date is $274 with a forecast for this month coming to $708. From Discovery Center and from the monthly SAP bill, you might be familiar with the commercial metric that we attach to SAP HANA Cloud, which is capacity units, where again, you see the same information, but then you also have insight in some technical metrics. Technical metrics are more under the hood, and depending on the service, they differ. This is now a database service, data management platform. And here, for example, that is expressed in memory, vCPUs, data transfer, network, backup, and those kind of things. And each of them, of course, have a certain usage, technical usage on how they are being consumed across all your different sub-accounts. We also give you insight in how the cost tracks, where you clearly see that at the beginning of the month, you start with a zero balance and then it ramps up towards the end of the month before it resets again for the new month. So this just to visually see how your usage tracks and where maybe some spikes occur or things look different than what you would expect. Now, each of them, of course, have more detail. If we drill down into the commercial metric, then, for example, we can see which directories or which sub-accounts have an active instance of HANA Cloud and contribute to the overall cost of HANA Cloud for your global account. So here we see 3 directories, and each of them have sub-accounts, so also 3 sub-accounts where HANA Cloud is active with the individual cost consumption for each of the HANA Clouds. So we see that the HANA Cloud in FinOps is most of the time switched off because it doesn't cost much, while the data store prod and data dev, they are costing me more because they're up and running 24/7. Up until the level of instance we go. So these are now individual HANA Cloud instances where we keep track of the costs of these HANA databases. This also gives you access to the history, so you can see how that cost actually tracks over the month or compared to previous months, to really give you insight if things start to cost you more than what you expected, where that is coming from. This also gives you access to the forecasting configuration. So if you look at the line of commercial metric here, there's a column that says forecasting configuration. So if you click on here, you can actually choose your forecast option. And there are 3 at the moment. There's time digressive, which is a default that we remember from the settings file, time digressive, or there's time linear, or there's excluded. Time linear is something that is just, as the name says, linear with time, that is chosen here for HANA Cloud. So HANA Cloud is expressed in number of hours that the HANA Cloud database is up and running. So there's a time aspect. So time linear just says, take your $274 for the 12th of March, divided by 12 days, multiply by 31 days, and that is the expected cost after 31 days in March. That's a linear kind of forecasting. You can deviate from that linear aspect by going for a digression. There's a digression factor. If you put it on 1, again, you have linear. If you put it higher than 1, you have actually a progressive curve of forecasting. So this will yield more than linear. If you go below 0, then you actually have a degressive curve and a flattening curve, where you expect maybe that in the beginning of the month, unique users might start to use the service, but then toward the second half of the month, it's recurring users and that do not trigger new licenses. Hence, it's a flattening curve, so you can put it on degressive. And then the last option is exclude. Exclude could be relevant, for example, for integration suite tenants, because integration suite tenants, they are fairly stable. Once you have your setup of 3, 4 tenants in your dev, test, QA production setup, they remain quite stable. So in the beginning of the month, you start with 3 tenants. Towards the end of the month, you have the same 3 tenants. There is no kind of ramp up that happens throughout the month. So we just take the value on the first of the day to be the same towards the end of the month. But so that is for you to choose, and any commercial metric of each of the services have to be configured with the forecast that you expect on how you consume that service. By default, it receives what is specified in settings.ts, but here on the screen, you can choose it for each of the services. You do it once, and then, of course, that configuration is used every time the data is refreshed. So this was billing verification. Billing verification takes a very centric view per service, with then the breakdown on where it might sit in your account structure. The next module, which is cost breakdown, turns that around and looks at it from your account structure, and then identifies the services that are active in those directories and sub-accounts. So this mimics your BTP global account or multiple global accounts if you have more than one connected. And for example, in these directories, in these sub-accounts, you then see the individual services that make up the cost of that sub-account. So for example, the FinOps application that we're looking at here is deployed in sub-account IT. So I have, for example, here the Cloud Foundry runtime that I'm using, the job scheduling service and the build work zone. And then the HANA, as I mentioned earlier, I'm using it from a different sub-account. So that sits in data dev. So here I have the HANA Cloud that is used for this application. Now we see HANA Cloud here. We also see HANA Cloud, for example, in data store prod. So this means that now we might have multiple areas where HANA Cloud resides, but the costs are now aggregated based on sub-account, directory, and global account level for you to understand how each of the services contribute to the cost of these account structure items. This also goes into a lower level. For example, Cloud Foundry Runtime, you might have individual apps or individual app instances that contribute to a cost in order for you to see which app actually consumes that Cloud Foundry Runtime that you're paying for. Okay, so that is a cost breakdown. Has multiple views, daily, monthly, but just that is information according to your account structure. If you look at the next module, that is credit expenditure, this actually looks at your contract, your CPA contract. This is now a demo account, so the visualization here might not be ideal, but it does give you a credit line of your CPA credits that are initially on your contract. And then you see the consumption, the burn-down throughout the months with maybe potentially an overcharge towards the end of the month if your contract doesn't suffice. But this is just a visualization of what the effect is of the billing verification and cost breakdown, what all these services actually cost, and where we expect you to end up towards the end of your contract, so you can actually take contact with your SAP representative to make sure that you don't run out of credits. And then the next module is the famous cross-charging module. This is now where it becomes interesting for you to look at to see in your overall BTP contract where you pay your $1,000, who contributed to the $1,000. And in that who, it's not a question of which sub-account, but it's which cost owner, which line of business, which cost center, which project. Okay, so this is where now we use the tags, the managed tags and the custom tags to actually allocate tags to different directories or sub-accounts or services that we see to make sure that they are held accountable for what they consume on the platform. For example, here again, when we open sub-account IT, as I mentioned, this application that we're looking at here is deployed in the sub-account. So I chose to apply a custom tag that says monitoring project to the different services that make up this FinOps application. So I tagged my BAS with it, the Cloud Foundry Runtime, the job scheduling, and the work zone. And then I also chose from the other sub-account the HANA Cloud service as well with the same tag. You can do this in custom tags where you just a binary, you tag it or you don't tag it, or you use those managed tags where you also apply a certain percentage, and there you can actually combine values. For example, in sub-account IT, when it comes to line of business distribution, I decided that anything that comes in sub-account IT, any of the services that generate costs, they should be distributed where sales has to pay 70%, HR has to pay 15%, and finance has to pay the last 15%. And this is where you can actually start to spread out costs through departments and through cost owners if you see that they start to use these accounts or services. Now, this is the tag manager. The actual result of this tagging and what it then means for these line of business owners or the head of the monitoring project guy, then you can actually look at, for example, let's now take an example of an SAC dashboard, a monthly view on what the result of that tagging is. And you see here, this is now using one of those deep links that we configured in BAS before I deployed the UI to Workzone. This is now going to my SAC module. I log in and then the dashboard. And here I can choose any of the tags. So this is dynamic depending on how many tags you can you configure. And also the different values. So here I'm interested, for example, only in the monitoring project, which is a FinOps tool. And that's maybe to get some data, look at last year, because this year is fairly fresh. And then, for example, we see that throughout the months, this tool was deployed in May. So since May, we have data values, we have data information here. And then we can see that, for example, in the sub-account IT, there are the different services that I tagged. Some do not appear here because they do not generate costs. They are free of charge. For example, destination service or HTML5 repository. They don't have costs, so they're not shown here. But here we see that, for example, from sub-account IT in the month of May, my bill for this project was 195. But then, of course, in data dev, I was also using HANA for a few days in that month, using 120. So overall, my cost for the month of May was 316. And we see that ramping up for the full month of June, 550. And then it was rather stable, 5 and a bit towards the rest of the months to host this tool. This, of course, means I chose dedicated services to host this application. I spin up a new HANA Cloud and a new work zone, but of course, you can reuse these instances that you already have from different projects. So it doesn't mean that you have to start with fresh services. You can also limit your costs there if that is your options to do so. And then last but not least, there's the monitoring and alerting module that actually proactively alerts you if there are services that consume maybe more than expected. So here you can define as many alerts as you want. If you take a look at a sample alert, then, for example, here we chose an alert that looks at your commercial values. So it looks at the commercial metrics, the dollar values, not at those technical ones under the hood. And here we just chose to be alerted the moment that there is a service that is costing me more than, or will cost me towards the end of the month more than $100, as well as a service that costing me more than 100% of what it ever costed me before. So this is actually a forecast percentage. This is comparing the forecast versus the maximum cost that we saw in one of the previous months that was loaded in the tool. Just to give you an idea, if, for example, if HANA Cloud is costing me 1,000, what does 1,000 mean? Is it 1,000 compared to 500 from the last month, or is it compared to 2,000 from the last month? So this percentage gives you insight in how that forecast actually compares to the previous months. And then with these kind of thresholds, then at the bottom we have a simulation. If this were to be your alert, what kind of email would you receive? And now we see that in the sub-account exploration sandbox, there's one service, which is AI Launchpad, that is within these thresholds because my forecast cost is 710, which is above 100, and my forecast percentage is 111%, which is also more than 100. So at any point in time here, you can just edit these values, and then these kind of simulation gets updated for you to see what would potentially be the value of this alert if you would save this and activate this. Okay, so this just a very quick run through of the FinOps application. With this, we reached 8:49, 11 minutes before the top of the hour. So maybe it's a good time to look in the chat for the questions, open any questions on the line as well. Anything you want to discuss, we can just take it here. Otherwise, we also invite you to join our FinOps community and also have any discussions, brainstormings, or ideation together with you to keep it in the public domain. The tool is open source. It is free for you to change. It is free for you to make additions and also work together with us to maybe extend. One of the interesting areas, for example, could be those forecasting configuration. For the moment, it is very rigid, rudimental to say either linear, digressive, or excluded. But if you are AI-minded, ML-minded, feel free to brainstorm a bit on what that could mean in terms of using past data points as a projection for future consumption. That is all where we actually also look at everyone in the audience here to work together with us to improve the tool and to make sure that it actually fits your usage of how you do FinOps in your organization. But with that, let's open it up for questions. Feel free to unmute or put the questions in the chat.
Willem, I have a question here from Wasim, and I will
Yes.
read it here. Regarding the deployment option of SAP Build Work Zone, it is providing the solution for standard edition, but I wanted to deploy this to advanced edition, but facing issue when trying to deploy the app on the Work Zone Advanced Edition, it does not create the Work Zone contents as the content creation process has changed from standard to advanced. Do you have a solution for Work Zone Advanced Edition?
So I haven't tried this myself, but yes, it is possible. Now, it does make me think about a similar question. So if you have any technical questions like this, feel free also to go to Git and then in the issues, open an issue to ask a question. And here, for example, there was a question. In advanced edition. And then there is documentation that actually tells you how in WorkZone Advanced, the deployment process is different than to the standard on how it is documented in the tool. So I only documented the standard, but the advanced has a slightly different approach, but it also works. So feel free to give this a try. It is linked from the issue here if you just search for advanced edition. If it doesn't work, ping me either on the community or on Git or on Teams, and then we can look at it together and we can add it into the documentation to make sure that everyone can use it as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Actually, the colleague who wrote the question here also wrote it in Git. So we are closing a circle here. It's wonderful, thank you. One additional question is maybe something that I could take, and here is Joshi. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Is there a way to have a message level cost details for integration suite? One of our customer needs to track the number of messages processed for a specific integration application to be able to distribute the subscription cost internally with different departments. So I'm waiting for this question every time that we are doing this session. So thank you very much, Joshi. I would mention also that we have a dedicated discussion and blog post just on this in the community, because we know this is very crucial to a lot of people and a lot of companies. And in here, two great things that we can do. First, I can say definitely it's in the work. We're definitely trying to work with the service owner into bringing something like this into like integration suite. You can open the integration flow ID and see them by the integration flow IDs and see the usage and the cost per integration flow. So it's definitely something that we are aware of. This is just a mock-up, but we are working in order to bring it. What I could say from this post in a short, that there's, until we will bring this solution automatically into the application, think that you can get into the cockpit, in the integration suite cockpit, see the quantities per iFlow ID, if you see it per day, or you want to download per all the days and do some average, and take these numbers of the average of messages per iFlow ID, and maybe take the 10 most important ones and put them as managed tags for the integration suite instance. This is your workaround, how to take data from the integration suite cockpit and persist it in the application. But this is a workaround, we know it, and we are definitely working with the service owner to bring it as we saw before. And it's not just with integration suite, it's with the HDI containers under HANA Cloud, it's with the LLM, all right, the LLM inside Gen AI Core, that we are also working with them, but we need to understand it's a lot of processing from the service to start meter on lower than the commercial metric entity, but it's something that we are totally make sure that the service owner knows about it. And there is also a process for integration suite. They will bring more and more capabilities to the integration suite cockpit. Once they see this is very being used, and there is lots of influence tickets requesting from them also to persist it in the metering, we will see it also in the application. So definitely a very important topic, and definitely something that we are targeting to bring soon.
Thank you.
No problem. So Ravi, do you ask if for the application of the FinOps, do we need integration suite? So no. All right. Any more questions? Feel free to unmute and ask it.
Maybe we ran a session earlier today for the APJ region, and there was one of the questions on who would use this tool or which persona would use the tool. And there we kind of discussed that it can be a more technical person that will be responsible for implementing and deploying the tool. Of course, someone that has access to different areas to deploy it. And then also do the needful configuration with the forecasting to make sure that it's in line. and apply the tags, but then it would be the business owners or the cost owners that might use only the SAC interface to consume their kind of, let's call it the internal bill on how the cross-charging takes an effect on their cost center. So it is possible to access the SAC dashboards directly. They do not have to go via the FinOps work zone UI. And because, these are typically non-technical users, so you just want to give them a story to say, this is a story, look at page 2, and that's where you see the costs that are allocated to your cost center.
Perfect. Sarma, I see your hands raised.
Yeah,
Yes.
Is there a cost to using this app itself, service itself?
There is no license cost because the source code is available to you from GitHub. But of course, because it runs in your own BTP global account, there are services that are required, for example, HANA Cloud and WorkZone. And they, of course, unless you use a free tier, they are charged for. So there's no direct cost to this application, but it needs hosting on your BTP account for which you need to pay with some credits or reuse existing services that already have it activated.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Barry. Cecily, Gaurav, any word closures from your side?
I think that was the best closure, I would say. Bring out your best. And also, Ravi mentioned, let's garage. So again, a warm thanks and a extended happiness from my side.
Wonderful.
So before we close, I just also wanted to highlight for the next session that we have in our garage, which is activating Joule in SAP S/4HANA Public Edition. So please, if you enjoyed this session, share this series with your colleagues and counterparts. And we really hope to see you next time as well. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.